is Dr. John right on cue. We're officially high tech today. We've got FaceTime going, John. How are you?
Oh my gosh, Joy, I'm great. How are you? It's so nice to see you and hear you. I just love technology for connecting.
Isn't it fun? I mean, what did we do 100 years ago? You know,
I know, it's true.
it's hard
So
to.
true.
It's like even maps. Like, what did we do long ago? You know, it's just it cracks me up. We've got, there's a part of me that thinks that we should not use maps and things. We should use our intuition because we don't want to become like AI. You know, we got to keep our skills all up to date, right?
I think you're onto something there. That's really true.
So, John, it's kind of wild when I think about it because you went the whole traditional route, right? Med school, board certification, professor of medicine, and here you are now channeling DNA activations and founding Unity Field Healing.
Yeah, it's so true. It is kind of a strange pathway to have taken, I guess, but it makes sense in retrospect when I look backwards and kind of see the trajectory of everything, how even though I wasn't planning where I am, it unfolded in such a spontaneous and natural way. So spirit is magical for sure.
I mean, seriously, who knew the textbooks of Lemuria would show up after the anatomy textbooks, right?
Right.
But let's do some real talk here. So when the downloads started coming through for you, right? Did you ever have doubts? Like, did you ever think, wait, what am I doing? Is this even a thing? Can I make a living doing quantum DNA activation?
Yeah, it's interesting, Joy, because when the downloads started, I didn't have the format of what eventually came of the understanding, the knowledge, and the work that it ultimately produced. I just started having these kinds of visionary experiences where I would see the DNA quantum system. I would see how it related to the energy field. I would see how it related to us incarnating as spirits into form. And so it was a body of knowledge that was kind of presented at first. And then subsequently, as more information unfolded, I realized I was being shown how to work with the energy system. And then that led to integrating the knowledge into a healing practice, and then ultimately the formation of Unity Field Healing. But I didn't know it was Unity Field Healing at the beginning. It unfolded over a period of years, actually, and then eventually made sense in the form that it took.
So when you say see, I love this question for channelers because I realized with Marilyn, who's a good friend of mine, Marilyn Harper, that she would say see, but it actually for her meant hear. So does see actually mean for you when you're in that space that you see it or like you feel it? Like what does that actually look like for you?
So I have different internal experiences. When I say see in this context, it was visions. I would be shown pictograms. I think the easiest way to understand it would be like when we dream. You see images or, vivid things that you are not seeing with your physical eyes, but you're seeing somehow in your consciousness, in your brain. Or people who've done shamanic visionary work. They have visions during their deep meditative experiences. And in those visions, there's a really deep meaning that exists in what you're seeing. In fact, every detail of the image or the little movie clip that you're seeing is there by design. Everything has a purpose and a communication of some kind. And so for me, the work itself came from visual experiences. They were really visions I was seeing inside my mind's eye.
Wow. So now you're about to retire from medicine, right? But
That's
I'm guessing you still want to work and thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, this work has slowly become such a bigger part of my reality over time as I began teaching and instructing and working, within the concept of the work. Um, it required more time. And so I've been in a slow recession from my clinical practice in that sense. I've cut down from 100% to 60%. and allowing me a little bit more time to focus on this work. But soon it'll be 100%. So it's a transitionary time for me as well.
Oh, that's so exciting, because I was going to say, you do not look old enough to retire.
Very kind.
Well, and because you know the meaning, retiring is like being tired over and over and over again,
True. I
right?
don't feel that way. So I think I still have a little spunk in me to carry on.
I'm sure you do. So tell me, so you had these visions, and over time, because I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? But you didn't know what it was at first. So what was the big spark with Unity Field Healing? Like, was it one big cosmic lightning bolt moment, or did it leave like a bread trail from spirit?
I think it was more a bread trail. There were probably, like, jumping to the forefront of my mind would be 3 or 4 experiences in these visions that kind of consolidated a level of understanding. So, for example, when I first received the template that correlates to the work, with it's an energy structure called the Unity Field Healing Template. It was birthed through like a visionary movie. It kind of came through a series of images, pictograms, if you will. And I had no idea what it was all about. And a whole year later, after journeying to Egypt and coming back home, I had a memory in a meditation one day of the template, and I hadn't thought about it in a while. And the template in the second vision became very active, and I started living an internal energy experience while I was seeing what I was seeing in my mind's eye. And so I started to put together the understanding that this template is working with our energy. But even at that, I thought it's maybe a personal experience. It was something spirit was giving to me, per se. I didn't realize it would be something that would turn into an idea that could be shared or used in a healing modality. And then eventually I realized, because of what I was experiencing, perhaps I could call in this template and begin to work with it in healing sessions with other people. And that's really how the concept of using it as a modality for healing really took shape.
So
And
tell me
then
about the first time you used it. What was that experience like? Do you even
it was
remember?
very interesting. Well, the first time I ever experienced it, it was me personally. And I had done a yoga session and I was having some issues in my back. And as I worked through with the template in this vision, all of the strictures, like the energy points of pain or pressure in my back, were released while the template was working on me. So the very first time, it was a personal healing experience. But then as I started to work with other people, they would have very interesting experiences. And some of these people were very seasoned in healing. They had done different kinds of healing work, but they were not accustomed to the vibration, like the intensity or the quality of the vibration. And they began to have really profound releases of energy within their body. Sometimes they would have spontaneous memories of past life experiences and release the energy, emotional energy that was imprinted in the experience during the session. And people would start to notice changes in their body, in their physical body, in their health, in their vitality, in their mood, you name it. There were all kinds of interesting experiences that unfolded. Everybody's different, because what I later came to understand was, even though the work is kind of healing in context, healing is really an expression of the soul incarnating and bringing in energetic corrections where anything is out of balance or perhaps held back in our energy fields. And so healing quickly turns into a spiritual process. And so when I started working with the energy at first and connecting it to what I was shown as the quantum DNA field, then I realized we're able to bring healing into our body and into our consciousness from this space of our greater selves, what we might term our higher self, or I am presence. People have different terms for it, our soul. And so really it's a spiritual integration that brings the healing into the body. And so what will happen often is people will experience the next thing they need to experience on their spiritual journey. if it's overcoming an emotional pattern or a physical condition of some kind. That's the way the energy works. It has this kind of innate wisdom and intelligence that responds to the person's reality in a really immediate and tailored kind of a way.
Wow. And so does the person have to actually know what needs to be healed or just be open to a healing?
It's much more be open. Sometimes people do have awareness, like they'll say, I know I'm working on this, or they'll bring a specific intention into the healing ultimately. And so sometimes there is a component of awareness, but very often it's the wisdom of the energy itself. It's like our higher self, our spirit, our soul. It knows what we need the most. And so it finds a way of bringing that kind of healing forward above and beyond even what our simple conscious intention might be. So sometimes people have very big responses to simple intentions. So they might put a little intention in for some kind of a healing or consciousness experience. But then spirit responds in a really magnified way, I find. It really knows how to help us in ways that perhaps we don't even know we would benefit from that help.
Yeah, just sit back and receive, right?
Beautiful. Exactly right. Yeah.
And and the mission has evolved too, hasn't it? It's like every time you say yes, the next layer unfolds.
Yeah, for sure. So like I started to do the work personally, as a practitioner, if you will. And then I began to have an intuitive sense of guidance how to develop or format the work in a way that would be a teachable session or a teachable modality. And so that turned into initiating practitioners to be able to do the work. And that was a really powerful experience. I did it, of course, with some fears and trepidations like we all face when we're making these kinds of decisions. But I went through them, like we all do. And the response to it was phenomenal. I was a little worried, like, can I teach this? Can I transfer the consciousness of this energy and the pattern? Can I help another person use the same energy structure to help other people? And so I had all these questions that I knew I could only really answer by experience because I wasn't learning this from a textbook or school. I was learning it from an inner process. And so as that took shape and practitioners were trained in the work, they were having these incredible experiences. Like I can't count the number of people who would say to me things like, I have never felt anything like that in my entire life. Or I've spent my whole life wanting to see energy. And for the first time in my life, I've seen energy. Or I saw my soul. Or I healed this issue or attribute I know I did from the experience. And so people were kind of giving this feedback, which was really, of course, powerful and supportive and encouraging. And that gave me I think the stamina, the energy, the faith really to be able to continue with the work. And then as more and more practitioners did the training and began to have their own experiences with their clients and the feedback I was getting from them, I realized it's completely transferable in that teaching format. But then, even more recently, for the very first time, just last week, we taught the very first class of teachers. So there will actually be now a whole group of teachers who can give the practitioner initiations to other people as well. So there's a beautiful expansion and development of the work in a very organic way.
That's so fun. It just makes me think of, Spirit saying to you, congratulations, John, here's your next download, no user manual included.
Absolutely. In fact, I have a funny story to tell because one aspect of the work was after a seminar with Meryl and Harper. And in that experience, the Syrian beings came to me in that vision for the very first time. And they explained who they were and how they've been working behind the scenes in this work. Now, up to that point, you can imagine as a physician and becoming more visible, the visibility of teaching publicly and the kinds of experiences that can create. But I was okay with it all in terms of healing and talking about chakras and energy fields. But then I had to start talking about galactic beings who were part of the process. So that, of course, was a whole other initiation for me. I had to go through a whole other level of comfort development, shall we say.
I actually remember that. I think I was there when that happened.
You were? Yeah, that was here in
Yeah,
Ottawa.
it
You were
was a
sitting
magical
here.
experience. So let's talk about your business a little bit, John.
Yeah.
It's not always rainbows and unicorns when you're building a soul-led business, is it?
No, it's not. And especially if you're relying on the business for your own, personal caretaking and personal stability and all these kinds of things. Of course, that adds a whole other element to the stress, I think, of having a business that takes up so much of your time. But having a spiritual business, it involves healing or a teaching program, is like any business in the sense that it has to be a balanced structure, it has to be a well developed and integrated structure, and it has to have its own code of ethics and the all the things that would go along with running a good operation that is full of integrity and wisdom, and can take care of itself financially in the process of doing that. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of spiritual folks who start practices or businesses of different kinds run into lots of interesting challenges with the financial aspect of things. I think that is a big deal.
So let's get a little intimate here. What's been one of your greatest challenges running Unity Field Healing, and how did you move through it without just grabbing a plane ticket to Bali and disappearing for a year?
I think for me personally, the greatest challenge was not so much about the business per se, but about becoming a public figure, becoming known as a professional in a milieu or an environment that is non-traditional. And so when you have, a business, like a professional background in medicine or business or any kind of traditional 3D work, and the spirit is working with you to evolve you and inspire you to take different kinds of steps that would invoke fears and very rational fears and concerns, to have the courage to step through that. And I think that's a big step for many people. They have, their own internal experiences, their visions, their inspirations, this sense of guidance that's driving them towards a new goal that involves a spiritual framework. But they have to step out of the fear of being judged or condemned or criticized as they make a transition between those worlds. That probably was the biggest, I think, for me because of my circumstances and situation. But then as you start a business, of course, all kinds of things pop up. And because you don't tend to think of it as a business when you're working from a point of passion and inspiration, you just think about it as something you have to do from the inside out. And so being able to kind of take a step back and create it in a 3D form that will be sustainable and successful and helpful and be able to endure is a whole other activity, I think, unto itself.
Yeah, I agree. I call it coming out of the spiritual closet. And I actually, when I was in the corporate world, I had already developed my Facebook page and my LinkedIn page. And so I was already well connected with people, in that 3D area world. And so then when I stepped into a more spiritual world and doing more spiritual work, what was so interesting to me, and maybe you discovered this as well, that all of a sudden I was posting about spiritual things and my so-called non-spiritual friends were commenting. And at first I was sort of like, oh, they see me, like I got found out. But then after that, I realized that, we're all looking at each other's posts, and you just never know. Like you told me a great story about when you were at the hospital and I think it was your supervisor or somebody who you would look up to said something in a meeting. Do you remember that story that you told me?
Oh, yeah. I think it's about I remember kind of trying to get comfortable with people knowing about this aspect of me while in the professional environment. Because what would happen to me so much, Joy, was patients in the hospital would come into contact with the work, or they would receive sessions from practitioners, and they would know that I'm a professor at the university. And so they would go to their physicians and oncologists and different people, and they would say, "Oh, you must know this doctor." So quickly it became an exposure. Like everybody who worked would know what I was doing. But I remember being in a meeting one day, and we had a very straight-laced kind of chief of the department, very, very logical and not woo-woo at all in any way. But sitting there, and we were having this difficult conversation about some situations that had arisen, and he just pipes up out of the blue and says, "I really would like to change the energy of this space before we continue the meeting." And I'm thinking, did I just hear him say what I thought he said? Like I was really, I almost landed on the floor. I was so blown away because he talked about the energy of the room or the vibration of the space. And I thought that's really interesting because it began to show me that these spiritual concepts are bleeding into mainstream thinking every day all over the place. And so I actually was able to breathe a little bit after that because I thought people are much more in tune and aware than they themselves might even realize or know. So the transition from, everyday conversations to conversations that might involve some of these concepts or teachings is not such a stretch. And that's been my experience because I've met lots and lots of professional people who want to have interesting conversations about these things. And that would only happen, of course, if you had the courage to really be authentic to yourself and step out of that space.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really just a language. You want to kind of assess who you're talking to and then try to meet them where they are in the language. And there's just
Yeah,
so many
beautifully
ways to
put.
do that.
Beautifully put. Yeah.
One thing I've always admired about you, John, is you stay so rooted in your spiritual values, even while running a real growing business. How do you keep that alignment? Like, is there something you come back to when the human side of business tries to take over?
I think it's because having that alignment is a foundational thing for me. It's like not limited just to the business. It's kind of a principle of living. Like I really try to stay aligned. Now by aligned, I mean internal spiritual alignment as my compass. And so I try to live that way, whether it's going out in the world to buy groceries or a new car or whatever it is, right up to how you would run a business or be involved in any kind of a personal engagement in the world. And so for things that are part of the business, it has to resonate with my inner truth. Like I have to really feel an alignment with what I'm doing, with what I'm teaching, with what I'm participating in. And as long as I feel that and I maintain my own internal spiritual alignment day to day through my own spiritual practice, it really unfolds harmoniously. You just really feel like you're always in harmony with your soul's mission. And I think that's important. So I guess the two things I would say from that is having some sort of personal spiritual practice, whatever that is, whether it's meditating or yoga or being in nature, all the things we can do to feel connected. And then pausing and asking yourself, the questions like, do I resonate with what I'm doing? Yes or no? And giving yourself permission to stay aligned, to make choices that stay aligned with that integrity.
Right. And I think what's so beautiful is more and more businesses are actually making space for meditation and, allowing people to do inner work
Yeah.
in the office. I think that that's so amazing.
Yeah. Another testament to how it's becoming part of mainstream thinking. So that's
Yeah.
really great.
Yep. Okay, so now let's talk about that thing that still freaks out some light workers, charging money. How do you balance being of service and honoring fair energetic exchange? Because we're not here to be starving saints. I don't think so, not this lifetime.
Yeah. This really is an important topic as I encounter it so often with practitioners, with people who are evolving their healing practices in different ways. And a lot of people struggle with this for one reason or another. And I think that really we have to understand that as light workers, we're here to serve. Like our soul is waking us up to knowledge and understanding and inspiration to be engaged in a certain way. And so it's a service to humanity to be in those roles. But that doesn't mean self-sacrifice. And I think we have karmic overlays, I think is the easiest way to understand it. We've all had lifetimes of vows of poverty and those kinds of things. And so there's an energy overlay when it comes to spiritual things where we have distortions, I think, of belief systems around it. Money in our world it's just a mechanism of exchange. It's not inherently good or evil. It's just a mechanism that we use to exchange the energy of service. And abundance is really part of divine flow. Now, abundance, it really, when I think of abundance, I think about a fullness. It's like a holistic richness that you hold within yourself. It's not simply about money, it's about feeling aligned with purpose and feeling engaged in a meaningful way with your own spirit. But in doing that, the response of the universe, so to speak, what is really desired for us is to have the flow of money and energy to be able to continue with that service. And so, if we kind of offer what we have with a purity of heart, we also have to allow ourselves to receive in return. And so, I kind of see financial exchange as a sacred contract. It's just a mutual honoring of energy. So, if we undercharge or give our gifts away out of guilt or fear or other kinds of like distorted patterns of consciousness, we end up disrupting the balance and we undervalue the healing process itself. In reverse, if we overcharge or feel like, we're going to use this as a mechanism to take what's not ours or do those kinds of things, we're going to find other corrections of energy that have to take place in the system. So we have to really learn how to charge fairly. And it's not about ego, it's about sustainability. When we really offer a service to pause and really value it from an appropriate place of understanding and in a framework that it's going to support you to be able to do, continue to grow, and continue to give back to the world. And so that requires a little bit of reflection, I think, by all of us when we're planning programs or pricing programs and all of those kinds of things. And we'll know very quickly if it's in alignment because the universe will really want to respond and to nourish us, to give us what it is that we need to continue the work. That's really how I see it. And so, if we really are in a space where we don't feel we should be asking for any kind of a return of energy, then that's a healing that has to take place. It really is. That's what it comes down to. And so, if people are experiencing that, they need to open themselves to that understanding and let that energy begin to flow. And when they do, people are develop a much more open, wise, relationship with money and this kind of exchange.
Yeah, I agree. I want to go back to something that you were saying about spiritual practice because I have a feeling that this is very much in alignment with that. But, you have managed to stay so authentic, so you, in a world where spiritual trends pop up every 5 minutes. How do you stay true to your voice and keep your creativity flowing without getting pulled off course?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's interesting, Joy, because I probably don't really think about that. I just kind of do it, or do me, as they say. I think the thing that I think the reason it is that way, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is I stay in a continual dialogue with my soul and higher guidance. Like I stop and ask questions. Is this right? Is there something I need to understand? Is there something I need to be open to? Am I blocking myself? We can go either way. And so I find creativity flows most freely when I'm in alignment. And so through my own meditation practice and spiritual practice, it helps me stay in that aligned space and creativity can really flow from there. I'm not really, I don't really focus on trying to keep up with others or pay attention to what trends might be, these kinds of things. Just simply listening and responding to what's happening in my own innate internal experience. And the thing I've really learned is that discernment comes from embodiment. The more we're anchored in our bodies, the more grounded and founded we are in this world and in our physical body, we are able to see and feel more clearly and hear our internal voice more clearly. If we don't embody, then we're kind of floating around, wobbling up in the ethers a little bit, and it's harder to ground and to hear and be guided. So I think that kind of embodiment is really fundamental. It's a very important principle for people to understand. And then being able to discern that internal voice and let it guide you in a very specific way. We all have to kind of give ourselves the space and the opportunity to evolve and make changes and adjustments and develop new programs, but staying fundamentally present and present within your own spiritual groundedness is, I think, really the key way of doing that.
So does that come from like a specific experience that all of a sudden you realized, oh, this doesn't resonate for me? Was there anything that you could share with us that caused you to go, I need a process around that? Or are you just magically that wonderful?
I guess I make it sound easy, but I think it's through trial and tribulation. Like we've all made choices that we later realize were not the right choice or a good choice. And so, we all make our fair share of what we would perceive as mistakes, perhaps. But when you understand the bigger picture and how spirituality really works and our soul works to teach us, you don't make mistakes. You just create experiences. And the experiences are then guiding forces. So, for example, you might make a choice and then it doesn't work out or it doesn't pan out in some way. And maybe your lesson is around timing. You have to learn to be aware that spirit doesn't always respond in sequence. There may be a timing involved in the way spirit is supporting us. And so we have to learn patience and all those kinds of virtuous attributes so that we don't short circuit ourselves. But I think the key to understand is pay attention to your experiences and let them teach you and be open, see them all through the lens of what am I learning from this? What was the beauty or the value? What's the silver lining in this cloud or rainstorm? And then we always know how to correct or do it a little differently the next time, or be patient with the process while it unfolds. All that kind of guidance will come from that place of seeing our life, I think, through that lens. And so, yeah, so for sure. I mean, there's lots of things that, I don't really have to go into all the details, I guess, of them. I think the
Oh, come
principle
on.
is
No, I'm just kidding.
principle is what's important. It's learning how to let our life navigate us and respond to it in a dynamic and living way. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say there's no such thing as failure. It's just good feedback.
exactly. That's
It's
so true.
just how
Yeah,
you take it
so
in.
true.
Okay, I want to go back to abundance once again. I love to talk about abundance. And speaking of staying true around abundance, I know abundance for you isn't just about the numbers. How do you personally define abundance spiritually, energetically, financially?
What a great question, Joy. I think to me, abundance is about a state of wholeness. It's about feeling a fullness, a wholeness within ourselves. That's how I would define abundance. It's really when you feel so supported by life, connected to your purpose, open to the flow of love, of to creativity, to possibilities, and letting that energy buoy you up and lift you and carry you along in the stream. So you're right. It's not just about money. That's just one aspect of abundance. Like we tend to think about abundance in financial terms because it's the modern day psychology. It's just one expression. In fact, it's not even the root. I think when we're in alignment with all those other things, that kind of abundance begins to follow. It flows and it supports us. So true abundance to me is really when your inner world feels rich, when you wake up grateful, inspired, aligned, and when you have the wisdom to recognize that you can trust that life is working with you and not against you. And from that place, everything you need begins to show up because what happens with that frame of consciousness is you're vibrating in resonance with source. The source wants to support us. It wants us to thrive. It wants us to grow. It wants us to be creative. And so when we begin to live from that framework, all the things that would support that kind of a creation or a reality begin to fall into place. That's kind of how I see abundance.
I love that. I I just love that. I absolutely agree. It's abundance isn't necessarily about money. There are plenty of people who have a lot of abundance, financial abundance, and don't feel as complete as some people who may not be as abundant financially, but are feeling much more grateful and abundant within. So I love that answer. That's a beautiful answer. Okay, now let's get quantum, because if I don't geek out about this with you, who else can I geek out with? So how does quantum consciousness, this whole bigger field of reality, actually play into manifesting abundance? And how does unity field healing support people stepping into that?
Okay, so that's a big question. So we'll take a step back and answer the first part. To me, quantum consciousness is the awareness that everything is connected beyond time and space and form. It's kind of a field of possibility. It's like a whole domain of energy that is not necessarily visible, or we're not able to sense it with our 3D senses, but it's there. We live in this field of infinite possibility. And when we begin to operate in that understanding, we realize we're not bound by things that tend to limit us. We're not bound by the past. We're not bound by prior choices. We're not bound by the energy of past life experiences. We're not really kind of bound by things. And we can begin to align with new timelines or new potentials. And so it's really just a frame of operating to be in quantum consciousness. And there's a dimensionality to quantum consciousness. Like, we live in a physical body and we have attributes like our emotions and our mental body. But this whole beingness exists in this field of life, in this, this time and space of life. And so the thing that governs us are our own thoughts and beliefs and the emotions we hold around things. And to free ourselves up is often a healing process. It's about unstructuring energy patterns that we may carry, and sometimes for very mysterious reasons. And so what I learned in healing work at the beginning was, as I learned to think in terms of energy, I thought about, corrective patterns of energy, or adding energy to release strictures in the energy field to promote healing. But what I quickly realized is, as a being, we are a quantum soul. And this personality, this body, is just a moment in incarnation of a being that's so much bigger and so much faster, who's had a whole other array of experiences that we're not even aware of in this personality or in this life. And they have an influence on us. So, like, we've lived, say, for example, many lifetimes. And so the principle of reincarnation comes into the picture. And you begin to realize that energy from other experiences can affect us both positively and negatively. And so we may have fears of things or restrictions around things, or we make choices because of these fears one way or another, not even knowing why we do it, because there's not even an experience in this lifetime that would explain it to us in a conscious or meaningful way. So when we try to heal and change, we're up against a mysterious force that is holding us back. What I learned through the DNA work and working with the template in the DNA, it opens up channels of energy, a space of energy to release and recalibrate a lot of these kinds of things that remained really evasive to people who were seeking healing. And so unity field healing comes into that picture, because what it does is it begins to open up the 24th chromosome, the channel of energy that exists between our body and this incarnation, and the soul that's behind this whole process, this incarnation, but the whole process of our reality. And so it allows us to expand. And by expanding, then we allow ourselves to grow and open up into new possibilities. And that brings healing in place in many situations. It will heal conditions or relationship issues or self-perception issues or all kinds of things. But even more than that is, it becomes a reminder. It begins to teach us about our divinity, and that we're really spiritual beings that emanate from the Creator. And we take on a mantle of divinity, understanding that. And when you do that, you learn how to receive an authentic empowerment, you realize that this is true not just for me, but every human being. But so many people are not aware of it and haven't learned to understand it. But as I do, and as you do, and as anybody else does, our whole life is transformed by that recalibration. And so that's how I see unity field healing playing a role in that awakening. I mean, we're talking in one way about the ascension process here. And so that's a whole other discussion we could have. But really, the processes that we're given, like unity field healing, help us make that expansion and move into that space.
Wow. Yeah. I have to tell you something that you have the cutest giggle I've ever heard, and I want to make it my ringtone on my phone.
I'll have to give you a good one then.
Yeah, that one works right there.
Oh, that's so
Okay,
funny.
so John, do you have a story, a moment where you surrendered completely and what showed up was way better than anything you could have ever planned?
Yeah, I think the very first thing that comes to my mind is the very first time I taught a class of unity field healing to practitioners. And I remember building this training program and putting it, I'm very kind of conscientious and fastidious about things. I come from an academic background, of course, so I'm always trying to think of everything and have everything in place, and a little bit of a perfectionist, I guess, in that way. And so I would want to really build the course to the best possible version of what it could be. But I've been thinking in the back of my mind, is anybody even really interested in this? Or will there be one person or two people who, might be interested in learning this? But I kind of thought it doesn't matter. Just carry on. Whatever happens, happens, and let the experience make its own revelation. And so when the time for the training came, it was so registered that I couldn't even accept all the people who wanted to register. Like, it was oversold. And so I thought, oh my gosh, like that's really crazy. And then as I started to teach, I thought everybody who comes to this is going to be seeking practitioner training. Like, they're all going to be Reiki practitioners, or they're going to have holistic healing practices of different kinds, and they're going to want to learn this work for that purpose. And that was true for at least, I would say, 50% of the people who came. But really, the other 50% were people who had very different reasons for wanting to be there and undergo this experience. And there were people like everything from air traffic controllers to flight attendants to elementary school teachers to animal healers, you name it. There were all kinds of people in the room. And so what I realized was we were tapping into something so beyond just the construct of a healing modality. It's about a consciousness expanding process. And so all kinds of very rich and beautiful experiences unfolded from that space. And it was very humbling to watch that. And when I look at how small I may have felt in doing it and how incredibly huge the experience became as I moved through it, I was taught a really important and powerful lesson. So just surrendering and moving through any resistance, it really opens doors when we're aligned with what's true and right in our spirit. And so, I was so humbled by that, because I thought, never get in your own way. Like, if you're really listening to you, the compass of your soul, and you're really doing things, the response will guide you. And even if I had had a different experience, it would have taught me things that would have made, I think, the second experience one of that nature. And we also have to be open to that sometimes. But that was a really beautiful, rich, and powerful experience. And I think a great spiritual lesson for me, Joy, when that happened.
That's a beautiful story. I bet right now someone's listening who's standing right at the edge of their calling. Their heart is pounding. Their hands are sweating. They're terrified. If you could whisper one thing to them right now, what would you say?
I would say you were born for this time. Trust that what you're feeling is real and sacred. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know all the kinds of things that are going to happen, might happen, you hope happens. Just be yourself in the middle of all of that. Begin where you are and let your journey unfold. And just say yes to each step as it comes to you. and let the growth be organic. Don't force it. Let it grow the way nature grows. And so if you just keep doing the next thing, you fertilize the plant, you weed the garden, you do whatever is the next step in the process and let it unfold in a very organic way, everything will just unfold so beautifully. And the way I kind of think of that is moving with your soul's timing. And this allows you to build something really sustainable and authentic. I think there's a few pieces of advice I'd like to give, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Another is don't compare yourself to others. Your path is going to be unique. Even if it's similar or like others, it's still going to be very, very unique. And so you always have to stay attuned to your inner compass and then surround yourself with the support, people who can see what you're doing and the value of who you are and lift you up that way. And know that when you're aligned to your truth, life will rise to meet you. You were really, really born for this time. It's a very important time on the planet. And I just on a very personal level, if anybody's in this space, I send you a great big energy hug and a whole wind of support to help lift you and help you make the choices to take you forward.
I think we just shared a brain cell because as you said that, I was thinking, well, that was a nice big hug for a bunch of people out there who are going through this. Okay, John, before I let you go, you have something big coming up with the Shift Network. So what's the invitation? How can people jump in? Can you share that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's still in development, actually, this Joy. It's a program that is I've been invited to create a 7-week training program around unity field healing and consciousness development with the Shift Network. And the Shift is a really beautiful network, a very spiritually aligned group of people who have a soul mission to bring evolving information and inspiration forward to humanity. And so I was very humbled by the invitation and grateful. And so the program is in the development right now. It's going to take place in June and in July. The title is Unity Field Healing and the 24th Chromosome, Awakening Quantum Consciousness. And so it's an immersive journey into the understanding we're having right here as we talk about abundance and business and all kinds of things. It all applies. And so it's like a program where there's 7-week sessions, there's an hour of teaching, there's a period of question and answer, and then an integrative meditation for the energy of what's being taught in each session. And so a beautiful opportunity for people to really explore deeply if they feel called in that way. I invite anybody to join on. It would be fantastic to have you as part of the initial teaching.
Yeah, and we'll make a link available for them to check that out. We'll either drop it in the chat or we'll put it in the description. I'm sure it'll be in both places. So, John, I just got to tell you, I always feel lighter after we talk. Thank you for doing the work you're here to do and for making it feel so possible for the rest of us. I just so appreciate you.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I'm so touched, Joy, by that. It's what you say could not mean more than anything to me. To hear those words from somebody is such a powerful affirmation and attestation that we're living in our soul's alignment. And I think we all have the opportunity to give that to each other. I feel the same, when I speak to you or some of our dear friends too, I always end up feeling lifted, inspired, and things seem possible. And to be given that kind of inspiration is such a blessing and a gift. And we rely on each other for that kind of upliftment, I think. So it's to hear those words really touches me deeply.
Well, one of my favorite mantras is everything is possible.
That's true.
And let's do this again. That's possible too, right?
100%.
All right. Well, thank you so much for calling and for sharing this conversation. And let's do it again.
I would love to anytime.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Oh, it's cold.